Hello, my name is Miriam and I am 28 years old. Just a few years ago, my life seemed perfect. I had always dreamed of a loving family, and when I met John, I thought I had found the man who would make that dream a reality. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to share my vision of building a future filled with love and happiness. John and I married quickly. At first, everything felt like a fairy tale. He was considerate and thoughtful, often surprising me with small gestures that made me feel special. We would spend hours talking about our future, imagining a home filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet. I believed I had found my soulmate. It wasn't long before life gave us a reason to celebrate. We found out I was pregnant. John seemed as thrilled as I was, showering me with affection and making promises to be by my side every step of the way. Those early days of my pregnancy were some of the happiest moments of my life. I envisioned us as a team, ready to face the challenges of parenthood together. Looking back now, I can see there were small cracks in our relationship even then. John's smiles sometimes felt rehearsed, and his enthusiasm seemed forced. But I ignored those feelings, choosing to focus on the good. After all, I thought every relationship had its ups and downs. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into preparing for our child's arrival. I dreamed of the perfect nursery and scoured stores for baby clothes. I read every parenting book I could find. John, however, began pulling away. At the time, I convinced myself it was just nerves about becoming a father. I didn't know then how those small cracks in our marriage would grow into gaping chasms, testing me in ways I could never have imagined. As my pregnancy progressed, my excitement grew. I devoted every moment to preparing for our baby, but something about John's behavior began to change. At first, he still joined me for doctor's appointments and asked how I was feeling, but his enthusiasm seemed to fade. I convinced myself it was stress. Maybe he was nervous about becoming a father. The turning point came during our ultrasound appointment. The doctor revealed we were having a girl. I was thrilled, already imagining all the beautiful moments we would share. But John's reaction was different. His smile faltered as he asked the doctor, "Are you sure it's not a boy?" The comment stung, but I quickly brushed it off. I didn't want to believe it was a sign of something deeper. At home, I tried to involve John in the preparations. I showed him baby clothes, asked his opinion on names, and even let him pick out the crib. His responses were indifferent. One evening, I excitedly held up a pink onesie I'd bought. "Isn't this adorable?" I asked. He sighed and said, "Why didn't you get something neutral? What if the next one's a boy?" His words hurt, but I didn't argue. I told myself he just needed time to adjust. Yet, as the weeks went by, his detachment became impossible to ignore. John started coming home later, claiming work was busier than ever. When he was home, he spent most of his time glued to his phone or watching TV. He barely acknowledged me or the baby we were supposed to be welcoming together. I confided in my best friend, Layla. She reassured me, saying, "Men handle these things differently. He'll come around." I wanted to believe her, but the uneasiness in my heart grew stronger. Despite everything, I focused on preparing for motherhood. I read, planned, and organized, telling myself I could handle anything for my baby. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the fear that John's growing indifference was the beginning of something far worse. The labor was long and exhausting, but when I heard the first cries of my baby, my heart filled with joy. The doctor smiled at me and said, "It's a girl." My chest swelled with pride as I held my tiny daughter for the first time. Before I could fully embrace the moment, the doctor's voice interrupted. "Wait, there's another one." I was stunned as a second baby was delivered, another beautiful girl. My eyes welled with tears as I cradled her briefly before the nurses took her to the neonatal unit. But the surprises weren't over yet. The doctor announced, "There's one more," and soon I was holding my third daughter. 3 daughters, my heart was overwhelmed with love and gratitude. When John arrived at the hospital, I thought he would share my happiness. But his face darkened the moment he heard the news. 3 daughters? He said coldly, his voice dripping with disdain. I tried to smile, hoping to soften his reaction. Yes, John. We have 3 beautiful daughters. Aren't they perfect? He stared at me, his anger barely contained. I wanted a son, Mary. A son, not daughters. How could this happen? If you want to come back to my house, you'll have to leave these girls in an orphanage. Otherwise, don't bother coming home. His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could you say that, John? These are your children, too. He crossed his arms, his voice growing colder. If you don't do it, I'll divorce you. It's your choice. Tears streamed down my face, but my voice was firm. I'll never abandon my daughters. If that means you'll leave, then so be it. His face twisted in rage. Without warning, he grabbed my hair, yanking it so hard that I cried out in pain. Before I could react, he pulled off his shoe and struck me on the head. Pain shot through me, and I felt dizzy and weak. Suddenly, the nurse burst into the room. "Sir, leave now, or I'm calling security," she shouted, stepping between us. John glared at me as he stormed out. "You'll regret this, Mary. Mark my words, I will make you pay for this." As I lay there, clutching my pounding head, I vowed to myself I would take care of my daughters, and one day I would make John pay for what he had done. I lay in the hospital bed, the pain in my head throbbing from John's attack. His hateful words echoed in my mind. "You'll regret this. My daughters, born just hours ago, deserve joy and celebration, but instead, I felt fear and anger." Despite the pain, one thing was clear: I could never go back to John. Later that evening, Dr. Daniel, the attending physician, came to check on me. His kind eyes softened as he examined the bruise forming on my head. "Miriam, what happened here?" he asked gently. My voice trembled as I recounted John's cruel demands, his violent outburst, and the threats he had made before storming out. Dr. Daniel's expression darkened with anger, though his voice remained calm. "You've been through so much already. No one deserves to be treated like this, especially not after bringing life into the world." His words brought a small measure of comfort, reminding me that not everyone was as heartless as John. Tears welled up as I admitted my fears. I don't know how I'll raise 3 daughters on my own. I don't even know where to start. Dr. Daniel pulled up a chair beside me, his tone steady and reassuring. "You're stronger than you realize, Miriam. There are people and resources that can help you. You don't have to do this alone." Over the next few days, he visited regularly, checking on me and the babies in the neonatal unit. His encouragement was a lifeline, helping me feel less overwhelmed by the challenges ahead. "Your daughters are fighters, just like their mother," he told me with a warm smile. When it was time to leave the hospital, Dr. Daniel handed me a list of support groups and legal contacts. "This is the first step, Miriam. You've already shown incredible strength. Keep going." As I carried my daughters out of the hospital, I made a solemn promise to myself. I would protect them at any cost, and one day, John would face the consequences of his actions. This was just the beginning of my fight for justice. The first night back after being discharged from the hospital felt like stepping into the unknown. Since John had made it clear I was no longer welcome in his house, I had no choice but to rely on the support of those willing to help. Dr. Daniel had arranged temporary housing for me through a local women's shelter, one of the resources he had shared during my hospital stay. The small apartment was modest but safe. It had a single bedroom, a kitchenette, and a small living area. Most importantly, it was a place where my daughters and I could begin rebuilding our lives. As I set up the cribs for Emily, Grace, and Sophie, I felt a bittersweet mix of emotions: relief to have a roof over our heads, but sadness for how drastically my life had changed. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the soft breathing of my daughters. Their innocence and vulnerability fueled my resolve. I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning. I'll give them the life they deserve, no matter what it takes." The next morning, I contacted Ms. Carter, the lawyer Dr. Daniel had recommended. I explained everything to her in detail: John's abandonment, his violent outburst, and his refusal to accept our daughters. She listened intently and said, "You have a strong case, Miriam. We'll ensure he is held accountable." From that day forward, my focus shifted to securing justice. I took photos of my injuries and gathered medical records from the hospital. Each piece of evidence was a step closer to ensuring my daughter's safety and future. Meanwhile, Dr. Daniel continued to check in on us, offering not just medical advice but emotional support. His presence made the difficult days feel more manageable. Although the apartment was temporary, it gave me a sense of security and a chance to regroup. I knew the road ahead would be long, but I was determined to face it with strength. As I tucked my daughters into their cribs that night, I made a promise: no matter how hard it gets, I will never let him hurt us again. A week after I filed the case, I was home feeding the girls when an unexpected knock startled me. My heart pounded as I walked to the door, fearing who it might be. When I opened it, there stood John. His expression was a mix of irritation and forced regret. "Miriam, we need to talk," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His presence filled the room with tension, but I held my ground. "What do you want, John?" I asked, keeping my voice steady as I cradled Sophie in my arms. He sighed dramatically. "I made a mistake. I shouldn't have said those things. But you need to understand. 3 daughters, Miriam. That's not what I wanted. I wanted a son." His words reignited my anger, but I kept my tone calm. "So you came here to repeat your disappointment. What exactly do you want?" John ignored my question, his voice taking on a manipulative tone. "I'll take you back, Miriam, but you need to meet me halfway. Leave the girls in someone else's care, or better yet, an orphanage. Then we can start over." I stared at him, stunned by his audacity. "You want me to abandon my daughters?" My voice rose, steady but sharp. "Never, John. I will never leave them." His face twisted with anger. "You're being selfish, Miriam. Do you even care about this marriage? If you refuse, I'll divorce you." I met his glare without flinching. "If divorce is your solution, then go ahead. I will not abandon my daughters for anyone." For a moment, I thought he might lash out, but instead, he stormed toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back, his voice cold and menacing. "You'll regret this, Miriam. Mark my words." As the door slammed shut, I stood trembling but resolute. His threats no longer had power over me. I was more determined than ever to protect my daughters and ensure John faced the justice he deserved. He had underestimated my strength, and soon he would realize his mistake. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I expected. My heart raced as I entered the courtroom, clutching the evidence I had carefully prepared. This wasn't just about my pain. It was about ensuring my daughters had a safe future, free from John's cruelty. Miss Carter, my lawyer, was confident and composed as she presented the case. She detailed John's actions, from his violent attack in the hospital to his abandonment of his daughters. The evidence was clear. Photos of my injuries, medical records, and the nurse's testimony painted an undeniable picture of his abuse. Ms. Carter emphasized his demand to leave my daughters in an orphanage, a chilling reminder of his heartlessness. John's defense was weak. He claimed he had been overwhelmed and acted out of frustration, but the judge was unmoved. When Ms. Carter called Dr. Daniel to the stand, his testimony was calm and professional. He described the injuries I had sustained and the emotional toll John's actions had taken on me. His words carried weight, reinforcing the gravity of the situation. As the hearing progressed, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I glanced at Dr. Daniel, who nodded reassuringly from the gallery. His presence reminded me I wasn't alone in this fight. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. John Peterson is found guilty of domestic violence, child neglect, and abandonment. He is sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay a substantial fine for child support. Relief washed over me as the weight I had carried for weeks lifted. John's face twisted with anger as he was led out of the courtroom, but his threats no longer held any power. Justice had been served, and for the first time, I felt free. Outside the courtroom, Dr. Daniel approached me with a warm smile. "You did it, Miriam. You stood up for yourself and your daughters." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. The fight was over, but this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope and healing. Life finally began to settle. The storm that had consumed my world was over, and I could focus on building a better future for my daughters. Emily, Grace, and Sophie became my anchor, their laughter and innocence reminding me of the strength I had found in myself. Dr. Daniel remained a constant presence in our lives. After his shifts at the hospital, he would visit, often bringing small gifts for the girls, stuffed animals, blankets, or colorful picture books. The girls adored him, and his kindness brought a warmth to our home that I hadn't realized was missing. One evening, after the girls had fallen asleep, Dr. Daniel stayed a little longer. We sat at the dining table, sorting through some paperwork for the child support payments. "You've come so far, Miriam," he said, his voice full of admiration. "You've shown incredible strength, not just for yourself, but for your daughters." I smiled, touched by his words. "I couldn't have done it alone. You've been there every step of the way." Over time, our bond deepened. Dr. Daniel became more than just a friend. He became a part of our family. He helped me navigate the challenges of single motherhood and reminded me that I didn't have to face them alone. Slowly, I allowed myself to trust again, and with that trust came feelings I hadn't expected. One evening, surrounded by my daughters, Dr. Daniel surprised me with a question that changed everything. "Miriam, will you marry me? I want to spend my life with you and the girls, building the future you all deserve." Tears filled my eyes as I said yes. The moment was simple, but it carried a depth of meaning that words couldn't capture. Our wedding was small, attended by close friends and family, but it was filled with laughter and love. My daughters had gained a father who cherished them, and I had found a partner who valued and respected me. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. The future felt bright, and I knew we were finally on the path to a life filled with love and happiness.